our session today. Today we're talking about the books of the Jewish people, part two of many parts, because there are many books. But last time we talked about the Bible, just an introduction to the Bible. And today we want to talk about the biblical Apocrypha. Okay, the Jewish Apocrypha, because there's also the Christian Apocrypha, although there is a lot of similarity there. It's called the Outer Books, and they are religious texts written in large part by Jews, especially during the Second Temple period, not accepted as sacred manuscripts when the Hebrew Bible was canonized. Therefore, the name the Outer Books. Okay, in Hebrew it's called the Outer Books. Okay, out of what? Okay, they're still books. They were written not exactly, but around the same time of some of the late biblical books. And they were left out by the editorial committee. Okay, they sat down around the table, okay, and they said, this book, yes, this book, no. Yes, George?
Was there a specific time, date, or place for the canonization of the Jewish Bible?
We can only estimate that time is around the year 300, some dated later, more like 200.
Thank you.
Something like that. Okay, like the second century BCE. But it's kind of common in research to say that it's around the 300s BCE.
Who and where?
We don't know, and we don't know. Not who and not where. There is, but it's probably it's probably that sect that we today call the Pharisees, okay, the rabbis, which is kind of like the rabbinical Judaism, which is our Judaism really today. And they are the ones that are having those discussions around then. And that's also when they start forming their identity, which is an identity that's different from the other sects in Judaism. And that's how it kind of like emerges. But that's really a speculation in many ways.
Rabbi,
and where it's probably in Israel. Probably in Jerusalem.
did Josephus write about any of the Apocrypha?
I don't know.
He was just looking at the time
He
frame.
was very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
He writes about other writings, so I think he might have referred to them. If I remember correctly, I think he referred to them, but I don't remember exactly when. Some of these books, yes.
So it was the time when Romans Empire was. Yes, this is what I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roman time.
Yes. No.
Greek.
No. Greek Empire.
Yeah.
It says here, I don't
300
know.
BC
maybe I
or
don't know.
What,
300
the
AD?
Apocrypha?
Oh, BCE.
You talk about,
Well, Greece would have come first. Yeah.
No, I don't see the Apocrypha in the Jewish literature.
you said something 300, you said something 300.
Yeah, around the year 300.
300, so this is what I'm looking, if I'm moving correctly, I'm not sure.
No, it's BCE. You see, it
Oh,
says
BC.
Greece.
Oh, BC.
It's around the
Okay.
time of the Greeks or the Persians.
Okay.
And hello.
Well,
Maybe my mother, who's on the call here, maybe she has better knowledge of the theories of how the Bible was canonized. But today we're talking about the biblical Apocrypha. Some of these books are considered sacred in certain Christian denominations and are included in their versions of the Old Testament. Okay, so these books that are not at the time of Jesus, they're written before, did not make it to the Bible, but were adapted by the Christian church, okay, to become holy books, okay?
Justify Jesus.
Yeah, sort of like a lot of them, especially the ones that kind of like predict.
I think the Messiah.
They talk about the Messiah, and that actually fits very well with that time frame of the Jewish people, because there was like a lot of writing about the Messiah, and there was like a lot of expectation that the Messiah should be coming around that time. Starting, and even like the book of Maccabees, okay, with Judah Maccabee and his family, which are sort of like, maybe they were also kind of like a prototype of the Messiah.
So they justify Jesus by writing before he was even born.
That
He's coming, he's coming.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
Something of that sort.
they pull out sections which at
Justify.
times refer to David or Solomon, and they make it as if they're talking about Jesus, but that was not the way they.
Yeah, but because according to their tradition, Jesus is the descendant of David. So the Jewish Apocrypha is distinctive from the New Testament Apocrypha and Christian Biblical Apocrypha, as it is the only one of these collections which works within a Jewish theological framework. Okay, so the Jewish Apocrypha talks about the God of Israel, talks about practices of the Jews, okay, but it's just books that didn't make it. They're not deviant, at least not in an open way, from the classical theological framework of Judaism as it was at the time. So let's look. I'm not going to look at the Christian Apocrypha. I just want to look at the Hebrew Apocrypha. And just like the names of the books, I don't know most of these books, but if we look, for example, at this book, the Book of Jubilees, a very interesting book that talks about the Bible, not the Bible. It talks about like the calendar of the year. And it describes, unlike the traditional Jewish calendar, which talks about a lunar cycle, which is 300 and what is it, like 50 something days. It talks about a full calendar, which is something more like 364 days or something, almost like 365, like what we have today. And then, although theologically it goes well with the Jewish themes in terms of the dates, it doesn't go according to the dates that the rabbi saw in the lunar calendar, and therefore it didn't make it into the Bible. Or the book of Judith, which talks about the heroine Yehudit, Judith, who really who cut the head of Holofernes, that Greek general, and saved the Jews. This is around the time of the Maccabees, and that book is probably written a little bit later, and for whatever reasons did not make it into the Bible. There are many other books here that are very interesting, and some of them also take stories from the Bible and expand on them. They're written like it's the Bible telling the story. Like, for example, the book of Life of Adam and Eve. So it goes more in depth into the life of Adam and Eve. Okay? it's different. It's sort of like someone decided around that time to sit down and write that life with some kind of like theological reasoning and explanation. And obviously it didn't make it into the Bible because the rabbis or whoever was part of that editorial scene kind of like decided that no, this is just not going to work for them. Okay. Or the book of Enoch. Do you remember in Genesis, there is an interesting mention of Enoch, Hanoch, who does not die. Just like Elijah that goes up to the sky, the very mysterious character in the Bible called Enoch, Hanoch, and in the book of Genesis, and it's a mystery. No one really knows whatever happened to him. He doesn't die, and he's still alive. So there are 3 books here that tell the stories of Enoch and how he travels around the world, etc. So if you ever, have extra time and want to read these books and think and see what people in that era were thinking and what their theology was, it would be very interesting to look at these books.
Is he 1,000 years old now?
Right, so he's still around.
He's more than 1,000.
No, it's more like
Yeah.
visiting you.
More like
there, Steve.
2,000.
Yeah,
Actually, he's the one
he
who
could join our
wine
class,
at
right?
the
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, then there are the 4 books of the Maccabees. Okay, and
He's
the
helping a lot
books
because
of
he
the
couldn't get it.
Maccabees tell us the story of the Maccabees. Okay, and then there's also very interesting Psalms. There's Psalm 151, Psalms 152, and 155. What's the problem with that? Psalms
done by
151. What?
They're not done by David.
Right, because the book of Psalms, how many Psalms are in the book of Psalms? 150.
Oh.
Okay. So, right, the last one is we sing every Shabbat, right? Kol Shama, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Kol Shama, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. And that's the end of the book of Psalms in the Bible. Other people had the inspiration and they also wrote Psalms. They didn't make it to the editorial board. Okay, it's like too late, your Psalms didn't make it. But seriously, they might have a different, maybe religious take, or they were really written later on. They're like a pseudo, they're like an imitation of the way the original book of Psalms is.
Yeah, I just wonder, what isn't Psalm 151 something have the glass behind the ark in the sanctuary have something to do with that?
I don't know. I don't remember. We
Which
can look
one?
at that later.
Yeah.
on.
What are the pictures?
151, yeah, behind the ark there.
I don't know.
Okay, I wanna look at a text, because we said we're gonna look at text also from that period of time. So please pass this on. We're not gonna read the whole text, but I just want to get like a sample of how these books were written. And whoops, okay. Hold on, now I have to
One that was on top was from you. That's my
just
mistake. It's a mistake from me.
Did the people on the outside get it?
No, may we get some?
Yeah, don't discriminate the ones on the outside. That's what happened to the outside books.
Yeah.
They were left outside.
They didn't get there fast enough, is that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's,
Are we supposed to be seeing something, Rabbi?
There is one.
We're left outside. It could have been a Mel Brooks skit.
We're missing here.
here, we have one more.
We're over here. It's interesting.
I think.
Over here.
The last psalm in the single in 150.
Yeah. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
We can only read it.
The Piyuts are not considered Psalms because of structure?
Oh, no, they're much later. They're like more like the fifth, sixth century.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Book of Maccabees.
No, they're not considered Psalms. Psalms are different ones, like prophetic Psalms. Okay, so let me just share this from the book of Maccabees, and we're really just doing this to get a taste of what these books are about. Okay, so now the people on Zoom can also see it. Okay, so the book of Maccabees talks about the story of the Maccabees, and here is Matthias and Matityahu and his sons. Okay, verse 1. In those days, Matityahu, son of John, son of Simeon, a priest of the family of Yoharib, left Jerusalem and settled in Modi'in. Okay, so they are connecting this to a biblical figure, which is called Yoharib. Okay, so they want to show that they are connected to the Bible already in the first verse. That's very important to them to say, we're not just, fellows that show up in the story here. We are priests, and we are connected to the priestly family, not just in Jerusalem, okay, but also to the one in the Bible.
Rabbi,
And he had
a question.
Go ahead.
There is a town now,
Yes.
Modi'in. This is the same
This
place?
is the same town, Modi'in, okay, in the land of Israel. Okay, so that's the context of which this happened. Don't be very surprised because the city Modi'in in modern Israel is named after this Modi'in.
Yeah.
Okay, that's in Israel a lot of the
This
names of cities
name, but
are
area is
according.
different?
No, same
The
area.
same area.
This is the area where the Maccabees operated as well. So he had 5 sons. John, who was called Gadi, Simeon, who was called Tassi, Judah was called Maccabeus, Eleazar, who was called Avaran, and Jonathan, who was called Apus. Now, this is the Christian version, and it's all, and they had like Greek names.
Yeah, Apple.
Okay, so these are like Greek names that these people had. And when he saw the sacrilegious that were being committed in Judah and in Jerusalem, he said, "Woe is me, why was I born? I see the ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, to dwell there as it was given into the hands of enemies, the sanctuary into the hands of strangers." And he goes on and lamenting about the situation of the land of Israel. And turn to page 2. Is it verse 14 at the top or verse 13? 13. Why are we still alive? Then Matityahu and his sons tore their garments, put on sackcloth, and mourned bitterly. Okay, and then what happens? Pagan worship refused and resisted. The officers of the king in charge of enforcing the apostasy came to the city of Modi'in to make them sacrifice. Okay, so this is the justification for why the rebellion is going to start soon, is by the Greeks forcing the Israelites to sacrifice to their idols. Many of Israel joined them, but Matityahu and his sons drew together. Then the officers of the king addressed Matityahu, "You are a leader, an honorable and great man in this city, supported by sons and kindred. Come now, be the first to obey the king's command, as all the Gentiles and Judeans of those who are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your son shall be numbered among the king's friends, and you and your sons shall be honored with silver and gold and many gifts." But Matityahu answered in a loud voice, "Although all the Gentiles in the king's realm obey him, so that they forsake the religion of their ancestors and consent to the king's orders, Yea, I and my sons and my kindred will keep the covenant of our ancestors. Heaven forbid that we should forsake the law of the commandments. We will not obey the words of the king by departing from our religion in the slightest degree. As he finished saying these words, a certain Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar in Modi'in according to the king's order. Okay, so we see here the tension between the more pious Jews, the ones who say, we will not change anything, we will follow the laws of our forefathers, meaning there are other Jews that are changing. If he's saying that, there are probably others that he's referring to that are making these changes. And here, lo and behold, another Jew comes and decides to make an offering to offer a sacrifice on the altar. And when verse 24 now, when Mathisiah saw him, he was filled with zeal.
Zealous.
He's a zealot, yeah.
Zeal. His heart was moved, and his just fury was aroused. He sprang forward and killed him upon the altar. Okay, this reminds us, this zealousness of Mathisiah reminds us of the zealousness of Pinchas in the story of the Bible, where there is an act of adultery and idol worshiping done in the desert to worship a different god, and Pinchas comes and stabs the people who are committed the idol worshiping and adultery. He's stabbing them on the altar, and this is like a parallel story to resonate for those of us who remember that story. It comes to like make a direct link between Pinchas, who was, by the way, also a priest, okay, with Mathisiah. So it's like giving him validity to Mathisiah for what he is doing here.
The rabbis were disturbed about that activity of Pinchas.
They were disturbed, but not here in the book of Maccabees. They glorify him in that sense.
Well, the times were different, and he was.
I mean, the
very
whole
minor.
idea,
Obviously, it was different times. Yes,
yeah, the whole idea of taking capital punishment without any procedures and
The court.
processing in the court. I mean, but this is, in some ways, isn't this just a continuation of things happening centuries earlier where Jews rejected temple practices, they disobeyed the law?
Yeah.
This is just another moment in time. Same thing was happening.
Also, I would assume that the name Gentiles who were in Jerusalem obeying the king's law were Jews who were taking on the Hellenistic rights.
Right. That's the story of Hanukkah, and that's how it happens. And then on verse 24, I'm sorry, 25, at the same time, he also killed the messenger of the king, who was forcing them to sacrifice, and he torn down the altar. Okay?
Messenger.
Yeah. And thus he showed his zeal for the law, just as Pinchas did with Zimri, son of Salu. So if we didn't understand that until now, the Bible, the Maccabee book is telling us that clearly. And then Matthias cried out in the city, let everyone who is zealous for the law and who stands by the covenant follow me. Okay? So, and in Hebrew, he's saying like, Mi ladonai elai, whoever is for God, for preserving God's law, follow me. And that resonates also with a biblical story where the Levites are sort of like protecting God's name. So there are a lot of biblical resemblance here in this story that we see. And then this goes on and on about how they start going into wars.
Messenger frame.
And then move to page 5.
Maybe that's what I said.
How long was the war?
That's what I'm talking
It was a few years,
about.
a few years. Yeah.
No.
But it was around the year 168 BCE that they rededicated the temple. That's like when Hanukkah started, was around the year 168 BCE. And then let's just look at the last verse, page 5, verse 70. He died in the year 146 and was buried in the tombs of his ancestors in Modi'in, and all Israel mourned him greatly. Okay,
Where is that?
the Modi'in is at the center, kind of like the center of Israel. It's really in between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And there are archaeological excavations of the tombs, and we have them there today. There's like archaeological evidence that these things are there. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint here. And that was a little bit about the Apocrypha. The next book in line, and we're going like in a historical. Oh no, I'm sorry. I should have changed this. Dead Sea Scrolls. There you go. Dead Sea Scrolls come before.
Rabbi, do you want these back?
No, you could keep it. It's for you. Okay, sorry about that. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, these are like the next books that we want to talk about. And as you can see from the slide, the Dead Sea Scrolls, also called the Qumran Cave Scrolls, are a set of ancient Jewish manuscripts from the Second Temple period. So they come after the Apocrypha, and they're also not part of the Bible. They were discovered over a period of 10 years between 1946 and 1956 at the Qumran Caves near Ein Feshcha on the northern shore of the Dead Sea. Has anyone ever been there? Seen the Qumran? It's quite a sight. It's an amazing sight to see it.
It's a whole museum, actually.
There's a museum there with a beautiful movie, and you actually see the caves where they found all of this.
Yeah, I was there.
Dating from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE, the Dead Sea Scrolls include the oldest surviving manuscripts of entire books later included in the biblical canons, including Deuterocanonical manuscripts from late Second Temple Judaism and extra biblical books.
Deuteroconical.
Okay.
I've never heard that.
At the same time, they cast new light on the emergence of Christianity and of Rabbinic Judaism. Almost all of the 15,000 scrolls and scroll fragments are held in the shrine of the book at the Israel Museum located in Jerusalem.
In there.
The Israeli government's custody of the Dead Sea Scrolls is disputed by Jordan and the Palestinian Authority on territorial, legal, and humanitarian grounds. They were mostly discovered following the Jordanian annexation of the West Bank and were acquired by Israel after Jordan lost the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Whilst Israel's claims are primarily based on historical and religious grounds, given their significance in Jewish history and in the heritage of Judaism. So no matter what the political dispute is, these are Jewish texts, okay, that obviously are part of the history of the Jewish people.
Did you go see the scrolls when they were at the Reagan Ranch?
No, I did not.
Were they copies or the real?
No, the originals.
They were traveling. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing that they let them out.
Yeah, I know.
They must have paid a lot of money to do that, because that really
Yeah,
puts
you
in
could have
risk.
heard Sam Osowski try to read them.
Yeah. So here we
You
are,
can make out
okay.
some of the-
Here, for example, is the Temple Scroll. The Temple Scroll is the longest of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you see the situation that it was. It describes a Jewish temple along with extensive detailed regulations about sacrifices and temple practices. The document is written in the form of a revelation from God to Moses, thereby with the intended meaning that this is the more appropriate temple which was revealed to Moses, and that Moses's instructions were either forgotten or ignored when Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem. In other words, in the minds of the scroll writer, Solomon should actually have built the first temple as it is described here in the Temple Scroll.
Oh,
So this is like fascinating, right? Because if we would never have this, okay, we would not know that there are competing versions on what should be the way to worship God. So today, now we know there is the biblical story, but we also know there's a competing narrative. It's like two newspapers, okay? It's like two news outlets. It's like CNN broadcasting about a certain event, about, the war in Ukraine, saying Russia started it, and then there would be Fox News or whatever, whatever opposite news would be, okay, which would say, no, Ukraine started the war, okay? And until yesterday, you would say, who would say Ukraine started the war? Okay, but so it's like, wait, but I'm reading this now thousands of years later, and I really didn't want to know who started the war, and like who can I believe? And until now, there was like only one version of how things happened, and suddenly when they find this, just a few years ago, right? Okay, many of us were alive back then, and remember when they found these. So only thousands of years later, we understand there's a different version of the biblical story of how sacrifice should be done. And we understand that there was an editorial committee somewhere in a figurative way, maybe not in an actual way, that decided, oh, we're not going to take the version of the Temple Scroll. This version, the biblical version that we have today, fits better our theological narrative. It tells a story in a better, more convincing and coherent way to the way we want people to understand God and how he should be sacrificed and how he should be worshipped. So this is like like without this, we wouldn't even be able to even think in that
And didn't.
in that way. Okay.
Rabbi?
And it comes really as a dispute, and there's probably a dispute around Solomon when he built the first temple, that there's like these different versions. So there's there are even different layers of this dispute going on throughout history. And it tells us that there are different, it's not just one writer and one writer. These are like big groups that are ideological groups that are always fighting each other. And we only learn about them because they are here, because here they lived and they were writing these things and they were promoting these things. So if not for that Bedouin shepherd, that was like tending for his flock, and somewhere in the 1900s, and one of the goat fell or something like that, and he went to rescue the goat, and he found these scrolls. Okay, without that, we wouldn't even know about the story. They might be there till today. Yes.
Were the writers, I know there were many or several writers, because I saw a documentary that found actually villages or maybe like monasteries for these writers that did the scrolls in the area around Galilee or the Kinneret. But were these in competition or segregation from the Pharisees or the Sadducees or whatever, who else was?
So the I don't want to go really into the whole Dead Sea Scrolls story and who wrote them, because that's really a whole lecture. But it's really part of a sect that was not the Pharisees. They were like against the Pharisees. They fled Jerusalem because of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, who were very strong groups that kind of like pushed them away. They were like more of a minority. They were very extreme also in their behaviors. They would like on Shabbat, they did not do anything on Shabbat. They went into a cave, okay, and they would like just be there like individually. Everyone would be on their own in a cave and come out of it, come out of a cave on Shabbat. It was like very, very eccentric and weird behavior that they had of purity as well. And it was very, it wasn't even clear if there were like women there or not, and how they treated them. And that's like a whole story. But they had in their extreme ideology, they had a way of their religious practice. And here we see, right? We see this here, and it really looks like the Bible. And it says, okay, it like looks like the Torah, right? And it's written that way, but you know, as someone who knows the Torah, I could assure you these verses do not appear in the Torah. And this could have been the Torah if they would have won. If this sect would have won history in that sense that everyone would follow them. This is kind of like the Bible we would have, or maybe not have at all. Maybe the whole culture would have been lost. We don't know.
Well, do we
They did not succeed. And here we have the Psalm scroll, and this has some of the Psalms that are in the book of Psalms, and it has some of the external Psalms as well. So there was a lot of popularity for these external Psalms that are also here in this book. I don't know if we could read any of this, but this says Tehillah LeDavid. Okay, so there are different segments here that we know from Nevel, harp. So we can recognize different words here from the original Psalms, and some of them are also different versions.
It's
Okay?
amazing that it's not so weird that you can't read it.
Well, it's hard to read.
But I mean, it's
Yeah.
not. I mean, considering it's what 2,000
Yeah, that we're able
years
to read
old,
it.
and
Yeah,
it's still
it's still in great condition, and that's because of the dry desert conditions that it was.
Well, what I'm
Yes,
was puzzling, I saw the scrolls, original is they were, broken fragments all over the place, and
right.
somehow the scholars were able to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, they estimate what's in the blanks. They can't know for sure, but so usually the way it's written is like that. Like when they transcribe the text, so they write the original, and then if it's their completion that they add, so they write like 3 dots under it or above it. Yes.
Is there a difference in the Hebrew during these times, or it was biblical Hebrew?
No, that's a very good question. It's a more it's a Hebrew that's a little bit newer than the biblical Hebrew. And even in the biblical Hebrew, it depends on what era it was written. Okay, because the Hebrew dialect changed throughout the centuries. So the Hebrew that's written maybe in the 8th century BCE is not the same as the biblical Hebrew written 500 BCE, because it's like 300 years later.
Okay.
So there are differences, and this, which is written probably at 100 BCE, is even much later. It's 400. It's like different Hebrew.
Okay.
Also in that sense, but very similar.
Rabbi. Do we recognize, based on just human nature, that some of the differences may reflect upon, conflicts between, say, the Leviim and the Kohanim, or between the Lebanim and the Yisrael, based on the privileges that they had, and they would want to write something that by their position?
Yeah, basically, this is what Josephus really writes about. I mean, you're helping lead us right into Josephus, and the title.
Trainer. Thank you, trainer.
And Larry, that the title "Wars of the Jews" is what we're referring to. So that's exactly like that. It's interesting. He has like 2 books: "Wars of the Jews" and "History of the Jews." which is kind of like the same. The history of the Jews is like the wars that the Jews had, sometimes with others and sometimes among themselves. And this is perhaps the most influential non-biblical text of Western history. I don't know how many people are aware of Josephus and the War of the Jews, but it is one of the most important texts of that time. The Wars of the Jews is a historical work written by Flavius Josephus, okay, and his Hebrew name is Yosef ben Mattatyahu, the good Jew, okay, and but he changed his name, he Hellenized it or Romanized it.
He wrote about things that were in his time, isn't
But
that
no,
what?
but he also wrote before,
Oh, did he?
hundreds of years before as well, and he's detailing the Jewish revolt.
He was a Jew.
Oh.
Okay, but the important part is he's detailing the Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire, culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and he lived at around that time. Okay.
He was a Jewish general.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It is considered a primary source of understanding this period of Jewish history, providing a detailed account of the war from the perspective of the Jewish general who eventually surrendered to the Romans and became a Roman citizen. That's him. The author is Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian who participated in the Jewish revolt against Rome before switching sides and siding with the Romans. Okay, so we call him a traitor. Okay, and he betrays the Jewish people. He switches side. But thank God he did, or else we wouldn't have the history.
Right.
We would not know what happened, at least from his point of view. And he tries to also explain, he gives a lot of respect to the Jewish point of view. And he's trying to be a historian. And it's a masterpiece. It's a very long book. And thank God to that, we have the history of what happened during the destruction of the Second Temple. We have a historical account, and this is really the only historical account. So if you think of how lucky we are that we have that, okay, or else we'd never know what happened in the land of Israel. And it's very accurate. He has exact names of places. Archaeological excavations today prove that Josephus was very accurate, very exact. He knew exactly all and because he was like a general, as Jerry said. And he knew the land, he knew the places, and once he surrendered, he was in the Galilee, a commander. And once he surrendered, he accompanied the Romans, helped them, get the Jews, okay, which is not so nice. But again, we have a historical account of what happened in all these places and how the Jews either revolted, surrendered, etc., etc.
Does he explain why he switched sides?
I think he switched sides. He kind of like says to preserve history and to and to tell the stories of the Jews.
because the Romans would have, the only history would have been as written by the Romans.
Yeah, well, we don't even have the Romans account really of that.
Well, they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, they mentioned briefly that the Jews were like a pain in the butt, and we killed, and we won. That's basically what they
Well,
say.
the church may have expunged all of that too.
Yeah, we don't know. They might have had more writings, but it's gone. Yeah.
Yes, I just want to make comment because I really I talked coming to America. I talked to many American Jewish people, and I was bringing up name Leon Feuchtwanger and story about Josephus. And Americans, they would say, we don't know this name. We don't know the book. But actually, Leon Feuchtwanger, he was very, very famous German writer. He wrote a lot of books about Jewish not people, but some
figures. Yeah.
Yes, the Jewish figure. So among this is like about Josephus, and I was checking, said, how come like Jewish writer about Jewish the history and everything, and American Jews do not know.
Yeah.
In
Well,
Russian, everybody knew like Leon Feuchtwanger. So what happened that Leon Feuchtwanger loved Stalin.
mm,
And because Leon Feuchtwanger was saying good things about Stalin, he was rejected in America.
oh,
In
interesting.
USC University, usually
University of California.
yes, over there they have a museum. I think it's the biggest museum about Leon Feuchtwanger's book.
Oh, interesting.
It's over there, and if somebody did not read by Leon Feuchtwanger about Josephus, this is such a romantic thing.
So
many
his books are
emotions.
written in probably in Greek, and were passed on throughout the generations. And here is a copy of a 1581, a German translation of Josephus' The Jewish War in the collection of the Jewish Museum of Switzerland. And Jews kind of like rejected, and they never read his stuff until suddenly in the 10th century, a book called Josephon, sounds like Josephus, okay, comes up, kind of like an approved edition of his story. They take out all the parts about the treason, and they talk about the heroism of the Jews during the revolt against the
Who
Romans.
wrote that? Who wrote that?
Josephus Feuchtwanger, this is what I'm saying.
No.
No.
I'm talking about
This
the
is
10th. I'm talking about something else now.
Okay.
I'm talking about the 10th century.
He's moved on.
Okay. And we don't know who wrote that. So I want to read with you some parts of a very famous incident in the book of Josephus, which is the story of Masada. Okay, everyone here heard of Masada?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
been there.
What happened in Masada? There was a big revolt. The Romans are trying to conquer the place for 3.5 years. There are like 900 Jews on the top of the mountain, and tens of thousands of Jews, of Roman soldiers, well equipped with the best machinery in the world, and they can't get to this place.
They built a
For
ramp.
3.5 years. They built a ramp. They got everything. and
Hard
they
to
can't-
believe.
Okay.
Once they built the ramp, though, it was over.
And then finally they're able to knock the wall after 3.5 years and the people there, are not getting food, water, but they have it all there, and they're all surviving and they're all fine. Okay. Well, once they decide once the Romans get in, the Jews, what did the Jews decide to do? Kill themselves so they don't fall in the hands of the Romans, except for a few women and children that are sent. Okay,
Like 5.
and they tell the story of what happens. But how do we even know that this is true? How do we even know the story of Masada? Who tells us the story of Masada? Where is it preserved that he, even if these women and children told the Roman general the story, who wrote it down so we today know the story of Masada? And we actually have archaeological proof. We have the writings. We have the kind of like the dice that they rolled to decide who's gonna,
The last one.
who would be the last one to live, etc. We have Masada, right? We've been on Masada. We've seen the excavations there. The whole story is laid out. How do we even know this story happened? Josephus.
Because the tourist guide told us.
The tourist guide. Where did the tourist guide? Okay. Did the government of Israel sit down and decide that, this is the story we're going to tell the tourists? Okay.
No.
That might happen in North Korea, but not in a Jewish country. Okay. The way the story is preserved is because of Josephus. Josephus, the trader, okay, sits with the Roman legion, the 10th legion, on the side of Masada by the Dead Sea, okay, and he's consulting to him how to get to the Jews, because he's a general. He knows all these places.
You know,
And
Legion was only.
the women and
only
children
12,000
get
men.
to Josephus afterwards, and they tell him the story, and he writes it down word by word, and then he passes it on. And thousands of years later, we do archaeological excavations in on Masada, and we verify that his story, the way he recorded it, is very accurate. So can you imagine, without Josephus, we would not know about Masada. We would
Without
know
those-
nothing. We would
Without
not.
those women, you wouldn't know anything.
No,
He told us.
no. There are many other stories that were shared by many women and many men all over the world that we will never know about these because but the historian Josephus, that trader, he has it in his book. And he even brings the speech of Elazar, okay, which is what I wanted to bring to you here. Was there a question,
Yes.
Elizabeth?
No,
Oh, yes.
I wanted to know which group of Jews was up in Masada. You were talking about the Pharisees and the this.
So these were more the zealots, okay? The zealots that were not willing to surrender to the Romans. There were different groups through the time, those times. There were the ones who cooperated with the Romans, like Josephus. They're the ones who were the zealots, who were like completely opposed to the Romans, and they fought against them. And there were also the rabbis that kind of like went in between. So the speech of Elazar was the commander, okay, of the zealots on Masada, and he says, Josephus talks about his story. However, neither did Elazar one think of flying away, nor would he permit anyone else to do so. But when he saw their wall burnt down by the fire and could devise no other way of escaping or room for their further courage, and setting before their eyes what the Romans would do to them, their children and their wives, if they got them into their power, he consulted about having them all slain. Now, as he judged this to be the best thing they could do in their present circumstances, he gathered the most courageous of his companions together and encouraged them to take that course by a speech, which he made to them in the matter following. And this is a very famous speech of Elazar, which is read even today by army units on the top of Masada, and the soldiers swear,
the new soldiers
that are inaugurated into the army, and they swear Masada shall not fall again.
There was only
Okay,
They were not taking their new soldiers up to Masada, and
He would know.
they take it in Masada. It depends on which group. Some do it in the Kotel, in the Western Wall,
Yeah.
but some do it on Masada.
Is that the paratroops who do
The
it on?
paratroop, yes, exactly. Since we long ago, my generous friends, resolved never to be servants to the Romans, nor to any other than to God himself, who alone is the true and just Lord of mankind, the time has now come that obliges us to make that resolution true in practice. And let us not at this time bring a reproach upon ourselves for self-contradiction, while we formerly would not undergo slavery, though it were then without danger, but must now, together with slavery, choose such punishments also as are intolerable. I mean this upon the supposition that the Romans once reduce us under their power while we are alive. We were the very first that revolted from them, and we are the last that fight against them. And I cannot but esteem it as a favor that God has granted us, that it is still in our power to die bravely and in the state of freedom, which has not been the case of others who were conquered unexpectedly. Okay, and his speech goes on, and then he says, But first let us destroy our money and the fortress by fire, for I am well assured that this will be a great grief to the Romans, that they shall not be able to seize upon our bodies, and shall fill all of our wealth also, and let us spare nothing but our provisions, for they will be a testimonial when we are dead, that we were not subdued for want of necessaries, but that according to our original resolution, we have preferred death before slavery. Okay, and then the book says, finally, then the 9 bared their throats. These are the last remaining 9, or the last solitary survivors.
Going to the moon?
No.
Yes, okay, finally, then the 9 bared their throats, and the last solitary survivor, after surveying the prostrate multitude, to see whether haply, amid the shambles, there were yet one left who needed his hand, and finding that all were slain, set the palace ablaze, and then, collecting his strength, drove his sword clean through his body, and fell beside his family. And this last one was Eleazar ben Yair, and then the women go down and tell that story to the Roman general and to Josephus, who's standing there and writing. Masada falls in the year 73. Okay, the temple is destroyed at the year 70. Okay,
Wow.
so it takes more than 3 years from them to conquer, and Masada is the last to really fall, and that's the end of the revolt against the Romans, which ends, with them destroying the temple and really getting and then instituting their regime in the area.
Rabbi, was there any possibility of archaeological evidence up there showing secret passageways or areas where people may have been able to hide or flee?
Yeah, there were probably somehow people were kind of able to get into Masada and out, but we don't know if it was used or not.
Tunnels.
Didn't they
Yeah.
go
All in
out,
Israel,
did they go
they
out
had
to
those
forage? Did they go out to forage at
No.
all?
Well, not when they were under siege.
Yeah, no, not when,
That was
and
the
you
problem.
could see by the amount of wealth that they had, even in this writing. They had a lot of food stored there, they had a lot of water reservoirs, and I mean, you could see it all
Yeah, it
in
was
Masada
amazing.
today.
A couple of years ago, I attended a lecture of recent archaeological stuff, and it was ginormous. Their water reservoirs and food reservoir. They must have been stocking that for years.
Yeah,
The food and
Well, it
whatnot.
was Herod's fortress.
yeah, King Herod was the
Okay.
one that built Masada, and he planned it for a rainy day. He did not imagine that the zealots that did not like him at all would be the ones who would inhabit the place
Yeah.
and would get all the fame for that amazing fortress. But he's the one who built it and enabled this unbelievable piece of history to remain until today. So